the more successful you get in real estate, the more shiny objects come your way because you build a name for yourself at the RIA and people are coming up to you, asking questions and approaching you with opportunities to invest. And so if you don't have a vision, you're going to get pulled off track.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, flying solo this episode as Steven Silverman is out and about on vacation. He's over in South Africa getting a little personal time, and he'll be back next episode. We've got a great guest today. It's sort of, you want to do this the first quarter of every year, or maybe the end of a year. It's take an assessment of where you are in life and make sure that you're on the path that you want to be on. And our speaker today is going to talk about that, and we'll get into him in just a moment. But we've gotten behind a little bit on some of our reviews, and we really appreciate you guys that have gone on to either iTunes or onto the Google Play Store and left a review. We're going to get through them as quickly as possible. It seems like we, keep getting multiple reviews from folks, and that's so appreciated because what it does is it allows us to be able to bring great guests to you. When you leave reviews, our potential guests do read them, and it's meaningful for them to know that people are listening and it is the audience that they want to address, and they'll come on the show. So if you haven't done it yet, we appreciate if you go on and leave a review. It does help us, and in turn, it does help you. So please do so if you haven't. Let's see. Kai Spires from Indiana says, I'm currently selling my property in Indiana to move to Daytona Beach, Florida. Your podcast is a great tool in my pursuance of buying in Florida. Thank you. Sincerely, Kai Spires. Kai, we really appreciate that. Kai went on to the Google store and left us a custom review, and that's greatly appreciated. Today, as I said, we have a real estate investor and life coach from Life and Air. And he is, I think, a little bit different from maybe some of the guys we've had in the past talk. We've had a couple of speakers that have talked about life coaching and whatnot. And today's speaker is going to, because they are in the real estate business, they're going to bring it to you from a little bit of a different approach. And we're hoping that you're going to be able to relate to today's speaker. And Dr. Jason Wojo, and he's from Life and Air. And he's going to share with you 3 powerful things: why you're struggling to get ahead. And by the way, it's not your fault. What are you doing about it starting today? And how to follow a blueprint to get you on fast track to achieving success. Jason has a PhD from Duke University. He's a real estate investor, as I said, a business owner, a CEO of Life and Air, and his hobbies include a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as he says. Jason, welcome to the Invest Florida Show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Eric. It's a real honor.
From one of our listeners and friend of mine, Adrian Smood, had turned me on to you and told me about the program that you have and has been life-changing for him and his investment in real estate business. Why don't you just start from a 30,000-foot view of how you got into real estate and Life and Air and how you got into that business?
So yeah, Adrian's a great guy. He's one of my students. So right now I am I'm the CEO of Life and Air as well as a speaker and a coach for them. And I'll tell you, I got into Life and Air. And by the way, everyone listening is probably thinking like, life of what? Like, what is this word? It is weird. Just think of millionaire except with life. And basically it's someone who has both time and financial freedom and has a full vision for their life. And that's just in a nutshell. We'll dive into what that means specifically. But basically Life and Air is a company that is based solely around the principle and the philosophy of like, hey, we can have an awesome life, make a lot of money, and have everything we want in life, but not be slaves to our business, not sacrifice life to our business. And this is what I see. I don't know about you, but I've seen so many real estate investors go down this path of, a lot of times they leave their job, and I'll tell you that was my story. I'll tell you that in a moment. But essentially, they leave their job and they're working 40, 50-hour work weeks in pursuit of this elusive, we'll call it freedom. And what they end up doing more times than not is working more than they were working when they had a job. They're stressed out more. Every other part of their life falls apart, and everything else suffers, because they're pursuing this business without a true vision of their life. People are forgetting that the whole purpose that people get into real estate is to have a great life. And, they mistake real estate for the destination. Real estate is just a vehicle. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be passionate and love what you do in real estate, but it's really just a vehicle to live a great life. But so few people get there. So for me, I thought the key to a great life, maybe like some of your listeners, was that the key to a great life is great income, right? And a great income is linked to a great job. And so if you backtrack, you get a great job by having a great education. And so that was what I was taught as a kid. And that's kind of what our society teaches: get a great job and get a good education. That will get you there. And so, I'm an overachiever. So I kind of went nuts, and I ended up with 2 bachelor's degrees, a master's degree, and a PhD. Yeah, man, literally 15, and it took me a long time to be able to say this without crying, by the way. So I hope you guys appreciate this. 15 years of education. I get out of school, go into my very, very first job. I'm working for the Navy doing biological and chemical warfare research, which, by the way, sounds way cooler than it really was. And I discovered within the first month, literally the first few weeks of having that job, there was something wrong. I could not picture and it wasn't even just the job. It wasn't anything necessarily terrible about my position. It was just that I could not fathom working for somebody else. For the rest of my life, somebody else controlling my schedule, how much money I made, who I had to work with, what I worked on, all of these things were out of my control. And it just made me sick. I had a literal visceral feeling of I can't do this. And I remember questioning myself, what's wrong with me? Because I'm looking around, these are all government employees, right?
Sure.
And everybody seems to kind of just go through life, and they seem to be satisfied, and they're okay with it. And, government positions fairly secure, and people, you become a lifer a lot of times. And I'm I started wondering, is there something wrong with me? Now, this is just about the right time that I got into life as a student, strangely enough. So that we're talking 2009, 10 years ago. So I'm talking to my coach, and I said, am I just nuts am I crazy for wanting something more for myself? And he's like, man, I think the only thing that's nuts is you doing something you're not passionate about because you got your degree in it. And in my case, 4 degrees, right? And as simple as that sounded, I was like, man, you're right. And that's when I started looking into real estate. And maybe this is a similar story for some of the people that are hearing us right now. Real estate, I'm like, that's the key. And so spent a ton of money on education, which totally fine with that. If I can find a shortcut somewhere, I'm not opposed to that. Spent a ton of money on education, and I get my first deal. And by the way, anybody who's struggling to get your first deal, stay in there. It took me literally 82 offers to get my first deal. Man, I was, you always hear that doesn't work in my market. That was me. I was the total doubter.
82 offers.
82 offers. I was ready to give up. I'm this doesn't work. It doesn't work. And my coach was just keep going. Trust me, this works. And then I get the first deal.
What year is that, Jason? 2009.
Okay. And then I get my first deal, and I netted 33 grand at the end of it. And I'm okay, this, and that's by far the most money I'd ever seen at one point in my life. That was literally half my year's salary. Yeah. When I was working, and so I'm man, I'm not the smartest bull, but I realized okay, one real estate deal. And so I basically can do 2 of these in a year and make what I'm making at a job and have freedom. And so then and by the way, the second deal only took me 40 offers. So I'm learning, right? And then the third one is 24. And so I quickly started building momentum and started doing real estate, made 6 figures my first year just in real estate. And things are going well, at least on the surface. Okay. And there's a little foreshadowing here, right? So what happened for me is I still had my full-time job. My wife and I had just bought a brand new 3-story gated community house right outside of DC. All the trappings of success, everything looks good on the surface. But I came home every day And I knew I had to quit my job, but where I'm going with this, you guys will see how this ties into your story. So I have my full-time job. I have 3 side businesses. I got my real estate license, and I was doing that on the side. I was doing my flips that I just told you about. And I also had a health coaching online business that had been really, really successful, totally blessed there, none of my own doing. I just had been really fortunate to have some national recognition for some bodybuilding successes and winning some titles. And so I'm working all the time. Like absolutely all the time. Wife is doing the same thing. She's a freelance graphic designer in addition to a full-time job. And basically what happened was that she divorced me. She came to me one evening and said, "Hey, listen, like I feel like we're roommates. I feel like, I don't even know you anymore. This isn't what I signed up for." And I'm in my head, I was completely shocked. I thought we were doing this for us. Like, we're working hard now so that someday we can have a great life. Like we're just busting our butt and making a ton of money. We were making, strong, over $250,000 a year. And in that moment, I realized that I had sacrificed everything important to me pursuing my business. I gave up my relationship with my wife was most important to me. And I had just completely just made such a mistake, and it was too late. She had checked out. I tried everything humanly possible to get her back. But what happened was it was my fault. Like now, don't get me wrong. Like there was certainly other things contributing to our
Sure.
problems, but like the major one was like work. Like we both were consumed with work, and we didn't have a vision for our relationship and what was most important to us. And this is where I see a lot of real estate investors go, because I'll coach people, and I've seen people that are doing hundreds of flips a year. And okay, that's great. You're making a ton of money, which, by the way, it's oftentimes a lot less than people think, because now you have all kinds of real business expenses.
Sure. Yeah.
But, they don't know their kids, and their wife is alienated, and they haven't been to the gym in 4 years because they have no time. And every other part of their life is sacrificed. And so what Life and Air teaches is like, hey, let's make a successful business. Let's have a successful business, but let's not do it at the expense of life. Like, let's make sure that we're always putting everything we do through the filter of what we want most. And that's what we call our vision. And basically, like, by the time I got into Life and Air, it was too late. I had already kind of created this mess, and they couldn't save me.
It sounds like we're starting to roll into the topic, which we're going to go through these 4 steps, which I think you just named the first one, right? You just named the first one.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. What I realized is I didn't have that first step. I didn't have vision. And that vision is what people need. And by the way, a vision, I know it sounds like a corny word, but it's what it is what does your ideal life look like? And when people try to come up with this, Eric, you'd be amazed at how few people can think of what they really want their life to look like. So when I ask people what they want their life to look like, they're like, okay, well, I want, 20 doors. I want 10 grand of free and clear passive income every month. I want, 2 million in my Roth. I mean, it's all finances. It's nothing personal, because so many of us have been kind of conditioned to think that way. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's not life. That's your portfolio. That's your balance sheet. And so what we want people to do is create a vision for your life. Like, what do you want most? When I started real estate investing, when I was making all that money, all I was thinking about is the someday to have the great life. Like so many business owners, entrepreneurs put off their life until someday. And then I can't tell you the number of times that day doesn't come, because you get kept you get on this treadmill, and you just keep working and working and working until one day it's too late. It's too far down the road. It's too hard to unwind. And they just go through life. You might know some of these people. It's kind of like they're the Walking Dead, right? Like they have their heads down and kind of just plowing through life, hoping that someday something changes to get better. And it doesn't have to be like that. Mm-hmm. It absolutely doesn't.
So the creating a vision, I suppose you're talking about, let's say, that someone's dream is to teach, 30 kids to, like, that's the most important thing in their life, to like teach 30 kids how to make a better life, or how to read, or maybe you want to live on a boat in the Mediterranean. So is that the kind of vision that you're talking about, whether it be philanthropic or lifestyle?
So yeah, exactly. So what we see is like every person, what we do is we help people divide up their life into separate rooms or separate categories. Like, so we look at everything. So in anyone's life, you have your health component, your family, your friendships, your hobbies, your spiritual life, your charitable life, your finances, your business, like all of these different spokes on a wheel have to be in alignment, because any one of them that's out of alignment will affect another one. If you have a fight with your spouse at home, it's going to affect your business. Conversely, if you're stressed out and don't have enough money, that could affect your health very easily. So what we do is we help people look at each different component of their life, and then let's define what we want in each of those areas. And you kind of alluded to something here that I think is really important. Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What do you want to be known for? If someone were going to read your eulogy after you passed and they could not lie, because by the way, we've all been to those services where they're like, who are they talking about? But right. That wasn't the person I knew. Yeah. That guy was a jerk. and but if they couldn't lie, what would they say about you? And what do you want them to say? And what does that gap look like? And that's where your vision comes from. Like what do you really, really, really value the most? And like you said, is it maybe, and people toss around this word all the time, why? Like, what's your why? Mm-hmm. And I think of your why as basically your rules for winning at the game of life. So your why could be like to have, your definition of winning the game of life could be to donate the most, or to have a life rich in love, or it could be to be the best parent or spouse, or it could be to bring the most glory to God, whatever that is for you. It's everybody. There's no right or wrong.
Right.
It's just what it is for you. And but the reason why this is so important is because everything has to pivot around your vision. So when you are faced with and by the way, so Eric, this is something you may see as well. The more successful you get in real estate, the more shiny objects come your way, because people are now, you build a name for yourself at the RIA, and people are coming up to you, asking questions and approaching you with opportunities to invest. And so if you don't have a vision, you're going to get pulled off track. And this is why you need a solid, clear vision to guide what you're doing.
Yeah, and trying to manage that, man, it's so hard. I mean,
it's not easy, man.
It's not easy. It's not easy because I know I'm going to relate to everybody that's listening. Maybe I won't, but we've got a property management business. We've got a brokerage business. We have the podcast. We've got over a dozen reps and employees that answer to us. And beyond that, it's my friends that don't understand what my day is. And so they'll call with questions like they could get from Google.
Right.
And employees will come in and use you as the first line of a resource rather than trying to find the information themselves. And you want to explode. You don't understand what you're pulling me in. But this all happens because you've built all of these little at least we have these little cash flow pockets that require there to be water and fertilizer to be able to work. But where's the line drawn where, how do you try to create somewhat of a barrier where people don't rely on you for everything, pulling you in 50 different directions? It's hard, man, because, there's days I can't be patient with people because they don't understand what I'm going through. And why are you asking me a question you could ask me on Google? Or why are you talking to me about something that's not part of my plan? It's hard.
Man, I'll tell you. So busyness, and this definitely, what I'm going to say here is going to polarize some people and they might disagree with me. For a lot of people, I think busyness is a sign of two things. One, intellectual laziness, or two, fear. And what I mean by that is sometimes, for instance, I talk with business owners all the time, and they're like, yeah, but I have all these people and they ask me questions. And I said, well, do you let them make decisions on their own? They'll say, no. I'm like, well, why? Because they can't. And so to me, that's either telling me, number one, you're afraid of letting go of this task. Number two, you haven't done a good job hiring or training this person. Or number three, you haven't empowered this person to start and to learn how to think like you, because everybody given the right. But basically, as a business owner myself, I look at myself when I have those situations in my life. I'm like, okay, how did I screw up? What have I not given to this person? And by the way, sometimes even if it's the wrong person, that's still my fault. I didn't do a good job screening them. And so once people can understand that kind of transitional difference and by the way, I fully have to admit that listen, you could be a phenomenal property manager, or you could be a phenomenal flipper, but learning how to lead people is a completely different skill. So you just got to accept that this is, anybody listening, that's a different skill. You have to learn. So I would say learning to put those boundaries in place, but also learning how to really lead people and manage them is something that helps you. But here's the thing too, as you violate your vision it's not doing anybody any good, because now your business is going to suffer. You're not going to be happy. You're going to be compromised. It's going to show up somewhere else in your life. And so it is a learning process, and it is hard, man. Like, and it's funny because we have I'm thinking of one of my students right now who got approached to go in on an apartment deal. And this person wanted, basically they were supposed to do a lot of the work. And my student says, I'm sorry, that's just not my vision. And they're like, what? What does that even mean? And he's like, that's not my vision. Instead of him kind of saying like, no, I'm not interested, he's like, that's just not in my vision. And it's kind of like, it's just like a funny joke in life in there where your vision will tell you what is in alignment and what's not. And as long as and by the way, you may have to make changes in your business to do this. It makes it simple, but I'll agree with you. It doesn't make it easy.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's so many distractions throughout the day that chasing the next shiny squirrel, I get it. So you creating a vision is the first step. What do you do after you've decided, okay, these are my visions, these are where I want to be? What's next?
So once you create your vision, this is the most foundational piece, and you're in a great, great position. So now the next thing that holds people back from living their vision, we can dive into fear, but what I'd rather do is talk about the constraints that most people have placed on themselves that prohibit or inhibit their ability to live their vision. And most of those are financial. And so, for instance, if you have a job and you can't quit, it's probably because you have bills, right? Like, who doesn't have bills? Sure. To backtrack for a second here, after I graduated with my PhD, and which, by the way, the fact that I can get a PhD from what is considered one of the country's best universities, it has me really concerned for our educational system here. Just a side note.
Come on, man. Duke
what
University. Just make sure everybody understands it.
Yeah, it was Duke.
Okay.
I had my townhouse paid for, had my SUV paid for, and I had my health fit and fitness business that I had started previous to working for the Navy. And so I wasn't making a lot of money. I was making, I don't know, probably $3,000 a month or so, $4,000 a month, but I had no bills except for like food, right? And normal stuff. And so
Sure.
It was very easy for me to kind of maneuver myself. Now, you fast forward with the crash of everything else I told you about, I didn't tell you about all the debt I incurred, but what I mean by that is like when you can keep your needs simple. And, we believe, Life and Air believes in this principle called prosperity through simplicity. When you keep things simple temporarily, I don't mean in any way, shape, or form to say that people have to live like in a van under the bridge, right? Or eat like ramen noodles or mac and cheese for the rest of your life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you can temporarily curtail and cut back and kind of look at your spending in a way that, might hurt a little bit, quite honestly, you will be able to kind of live your vision a lot more easily because finances won't be a constraint as much. Sure. So we know this intuitively, but if you need $10,000 a month for your living expenses, it's a whole lot. You have less freedom to say real estate is your thing. You have a whole lot less freedom to go out as a full-time real estate investor than if your bills are only, $3,000 or $4,000. And so what we encourage people to do is like really and obviously we want you to make more money and cut expenses ideally, right? But I just want to emphasize here, this is temporary because people get pretty upset over this, there's some overlap here with some of Dave Ramsey's teachings, but essentially we're saying, hey, just temporarily until you start getting into stage 3, which we'll talk about next, just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. We've had students sell houses, downsize. It all depends on how passionate you are, really. I mean, you can go on in your life living in the way you want, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if there's something in your life that you're not living, that your vision says you want, like put yourself in a situation to win, set yourself up to win. Yep. So meeting your needs in stage 2 basically means like, hey, you're making enough money to break even. You're making enough to get by. You're not getting ahead. This is admittedly us working for those dollars, right? Dollars for hours. We're not using investments to make money yet, which, by the way, this is really important. This is where debt comes in, right? Debt, I would say more than any other factor I can think of off the top of my head, seems to keep people in stage 2. Steve Cook, the founder of Life and Air, once had someone say, well, you have no debt because you make a lot of money. And Steve said, no, I have a lot of money because I have no debt. And that's a big paradigm shift. So along with keeping things simple, I'd encourage people to consider trying to be debt free here. And if you had to think just for a moment, imagine that you put all your debt under the pillow tonight and you woke up and the debt fairy came and took it all away. That would be a pretty freeing feeling for most people. And the amount of money you need when you have zero debt, it's pretty liberating. Like you realize how little you actually need when you have no debt. And that's where we also encourage people in stage 2 to consider trying to be debt free.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I get that. So meeting needs is number 2. Mm-hmm. And then where do we go?
So we're meeting our needs, but we don't want to stay there, right? Because we're just treading water. We're not moving the shore. And so the next step is to start generating excess income, excess cash. Now, this, again, you could do this through cutting, but let's be realistic here. Like, you can only cut so much, right? Like, let's be fair to this. Like, you can't cut everything, and I think that's foolish anyway. So now we have to win with the game of money in a way that requires an offense and a defense. So, and just to use an analogy, like, in football, we have our offense, we have our defense. You need both to win, right? And
sure.
Similarly, in life and money, you need both to win. I kind of think of defense as our money saving, our expenditures, like managing money well. And the offense is our ability to make money. And you need both. And I tell people, let's work on the defense first, because when you learn to handle what you have, you will be better when you have more. Otherwise, I see people just spending whatever extra they make. They go from the McDonald's appetite to Ruth Chris because they closed a flip, made $50,000, and now they're broke again in 6 months.
Right.
Like it happens all the time.
Right.
And so we start generating excess cash through making more money once we've cut the expenses as much as possible, our overhead, our costs, things like that. And now making that extra money can come in a number of forms. We've had people do everything from drive Uber to flip houses to bird dog to real estate. By the way, I think is my favorite way to do this, and probably the favorite way of your listeners. Real estate is a phenomenal vehicle. It's a great tool, and you can generate excess by simply picking up your real estate investing activities. By still being careful not to violate your vision, right?
Sure.
With that money, you're starting to generate a purse of funds that we'll use in stage 4. And there's a number of things you could do in stage 3. You can spend this money if you want. Of course, I wouldn't recommend it because then you go back down to stage 2. You could invest it, which is okay, but you're probably not going to get the same returns as you would if you use it in real estate. You could give it away, you could tithe it, whatever. But what we recommend in stage 3, which again is another short-term stage, is you invest it in stage 4. Now, let me give one more caution here to everyone. In stage 3, it's not the time to improve or increase your lifestyle. Typically what a lot of people do is that wallet with all that cash in it turns into, hip national bank, and you start just buying stuff and improving your lifestyle, and you get the nicer car and the bigger house. Like, it's very, very easy to happen, but you got to have, this is where discipline comes in. You got to have a discipline to not spend that money and put it into stage 4. Mm-hmm. And so let's assume that everybody here is going to do that. And they're going to put this money into stage 4. We're going to income producing assets, I should say, because it's not always properties. IPAs, not the beer. So stage 4 is investing in income producing assets. And so like, let's just review super quick, like where we came so far. We have our vision, like the end game, right? Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. We know what we want out of our life. We meet our needs, keep things super simple so that we can live that vision easier. We're starting to accumulate excess cash. Now we take that cash in stage 4 and invest it into income producing assets. And what happens is this is where the magic happens. This is where now we will, and let's think of this, the game Monopoly, right? You get your 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. So let's use easy math here. I'm not a math guy. Let's say we can buy a rental property for $100,000 in your market. And that may or may not be accurate. But it's a good illustration. Let's say it throws off, let's say we do 4 flips and we make $25,000 a piece, and we're not living off our flip money yet. Okay. This is stage 3 income. We're not spending it, right? It's not meeting our needs.
Right.
It's not stage 2 income. We're saving it and putting it into our investment property here. Mm-hmm. So we do 4 flips, $25,000 net each, which is pretty, $100,000 property, you should be able to pull out 20 or 30 grand, maybe 15 to 30 grand if on the low end. And so you take that money from your property, from your flips, your active work, sweat equity, generated dollars. You buy 1 rental property, it spits off $1,000 free and clear because we took that money and bought that property free and clear. We didn't take a note out on it. Okay. We didn't take out a mortgage. It's debt free. And so we have 1 debt free property spitting off $1,000. Now, if our stage 2 needs were, so let's say $4,000. Now you have a position where you just started a snowball rolling towards freedom. And what I mean by that is you take that $1,000 And either number one, there's two solutions here. Number one, we put that money towards our stage 2 needs and we generate $1,000 excess and we can use that towards the next investment in our stage 4. Or now you have to make $1,000 less per month, which may allow you to switch jobs if you don't like jobs, may allow you to take a different position, may allow you to work less, may allow you to, like, it just opens up opportunity for you. And so what happens is eventually we repeat this cycle. In our case, let's say we do it 4 times, right? So that's going to be 16 houses, if 16 flips, which most people it might take. I don't know, it might take 4 years. It might take three to 5 years, let's say. Some people can do that in a year. You take all that money. We have $4,000 per month passive income from our rentals, and now work becomes optional. And let me just say this too, man. Everybody's like, oh, okay, so that's when I retire and just crash on the beach for the rest of my life with a margarita. And I'm like, no, like nobody I know that is an entrepreneur lives that way for long before they go nuts. Like right. maybe it's going to be a few months, maybe it's even a few years, but like eventually we're meant to work. But the freedom in getting to work versus having to work is what makes all the difference in the world. Like there's just such a difference. You could be doing the exact same thing in life, and when you get to do it versus have to do it, it feels so different. So different.
Amen, brother. I hear you. Now, devil's advocate.
Yeah.
When you sit down and explain the game of football the first time to somebody and you just say, look, I mean, what you got to do is move this ball down the field and put it in the end zone. Seems really simple, except when you realize there's these linemen that are crashing down on you and there's this guy running 4'3" that maybe your arm's not strong enough to hit him in stride. All these things that people start getting in their head and say, oh my gosh, it seems like really simple until everything starts crashing around. What kind of processes do you have in place to get that person's head moving in the right direction to make sure that they are actually moving the ball and it becomes a matter of habit for them rather than this overwhelming, my old boss used to say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And how do you go about trying to break this down into sections? I see the 4 stages. I see that. But I mean, you can't just tell people, right? What are the processes like?
No, man. And I got to tell you, this is a great point because first of all, let me say, everybody wants to jump to stage 3, because this is what everybody teaches, like how to make money. And so what you're saying is absolutely true though. Like you have to realize, number one, this is a very, very different paradigm of living, because the typical approach is, hey, I'm just going to take out, and everybody tries to jump to stage 3 or stage 4, but they use debt. And so let me address this first before I answer your question. Like the way it's been working is most people will say, hey, I want to buy a rental property. They don't even have a capital expenditures account. They are not in a position to float that mortgage if things go south. And in fact, like back in the day, you're probably familiar with this as well. Like with the way you bought income property was you bought one with cash, then you cashed it out, right? You refied it, pulled that cash, put it into another one, and you created a house of cards. That's a quick way to and by the way, it's a quick way. It works while it works. It works when it works, but it doesn't work like when it doesn't work.
Sure.
Meaning, like, while it seems, I think what's most intimidating to people about this process is like the thought that like is stage 4. Like, hey, I will never have enough cash to make enough passive income that I want in my life. And there's some truth to that, in the fact that it will probably take longer than if you were to take out leverage. Mm-hmm. But let me also say, it comes back to your vision. Like if your vision is to have the most money, and you can sleep at night with that debt. We have people that are totally fine being 80-90% leveraged. We have other people that are like, man, I wouldn't sleep one wink until it was all paid off, or till I was completely a ton equity rich. So this is where your vision comes in. Like, it does take a little longer to get financially free, but I guess the trade-off here is your risk is a lot lower because, first of all, I've never seen a debt-free business go bankrupt. Second of all, you actually get to keep, and I think you make better decisions when you have debt-free assets. So, for instance, if there's landlords listening right now, how many times have you placed a tenant in your property when you knew in your gut you shouldn't. There was something wrong. It was a red flag, but you had that mortgage payment due, and you're like, man, I'm just going to take a chance here, and like, let's hope it doesn't bite me. Or, at the end of the day, you have a tenant trash a property, and all of a sudden, you're making, say, $100, $200, $300 net rent because it's leveraged, and it just wipes out half of your portfolio's cash flow. It doesn't happen that way when you do this debt free. Now, one thing I didn't even mention yet, Eric, that's really, really important is one of the things that we've developed to counter this, and I'd say that's probably the biggest fear is the timeline associated with this. One of the ways we've curtailed that is by helping people invest debt free. So what a lot of people in Life and Air do, for instance, is we will have a money guy and we'll have a property guy who will just simply joint venture on a property where there's no debt. Meaning like this, the money guy will come up, pay for this thing. It's basically like an equity participation.
Sure.
So there's no debt, and you simply split the income. And so someone who doesn't have a lot of money can now get closer to financial freedom without increasing their stage 2 needs because they have no debt. And the money guy is happy of course the numbers have to work, right?
Sure.
But they're happy because, now they're only going to get paid if the rent gets paid, but now they're in a position where, they're happy too. So it's kind of like that. That's one way that we've found to kind of like facilitate this transaction and helping both people get to stage 4 quicker. Other challenges that get, like you say, getting people's heads straight. I'd say that's one of the biggest objections we get is like, hey, it's unrealistic. It takes too long. The debt-free investing debt-free helps. The other thing I'd say is people are like, well, they have a real challenge with their identity of just keeping up with the Joneses. I remember when I spoke with Steve Cook, again, the founder, he said when he first came up with Life and Air, this is like way back 2007-ish, he decided to downsize his house. And Steve had a huge house in Maryland, a very expensive part of Maryland. And people started talking like, man, is Steve losing his business? Like, Steve, what's going on with Steve? He's losing it all. He's going under. He's struggling. And so he said that like basically it was just an attestament to like the culture that we live in. I've had people approach me and said, I want to get this M-Class SUV, this Mercedes, because it's the safest one on the market. And we'll do research and find out like that year the Honda Pilot is like the safest or something. And they're like, well, I could never do that. And it comes out that they're using their kids as an excuse, but really it's getting your head around the fact that the money side of things isn't what life's all about. That's another big stumbling block we see with people is really being okay with that and realizing it's okay to step off this path. And this is not the road that's going to get me to where I want to go. So those are two big ones that are initially popping into my head. What are people going to think? Like they're going to think I'm nuts. Now that's how it usually starts. But what it usually ends up being is like people are wondering like, how are you doing this? How are you only working 20, 25 hours a week and making the money you want? And that's an exercise we go through with people as well, like to help them figure out what they have to do in their business to make that the income they need. But like, it's a process, man. And it's very countercultural. Like we just live in a time and an age where it's just kind of put your head down and work until you're too old to retire or even just build, especially, I would say, I'm going to be a little sexist here, but especially men, we got some thick noggins, man. Like we will just keep building and building and building just to build, just to conquer, just to grow, just to get better in our own mind, when not realizing that better sometimes doesn't mean bigger. There's a lot of kind of mindset shifts that have to occur to be successful at this. But I can tell you, like Adrian's one of the examples of guys, the guy who introduced us.
Yep.
He's an example of a guy who's living life now. Like he does mobile homes, and he's in our coaching group, and he's not making the most money in our group. I mean, we have people making a lot more than him, but he is living life and he has more than enough, and he's still growing. He's still getting better. He's still making more money. He's still doing more deals, but he's not going to do it at the expense of his life. He's doing these cross Florida tandem bike rides, and he's doing like all this crazy stuff and traveling. I think he travels once a month now, and he's doing all these things because that to him, and he's doing it with his wife, by the way, who was able to quit her job. That was in their vision. Like her vision was, she was a nurse. Her vision was to quit her job. And he got her out of her job last year, and now they travel all the time and have fun. And like, And so for him, he was able to build the business around the vision and realize and I think Adrian's been in Lifeiner now, I want to say maybe 2.5 years or so.
Oh man, I've known Adrian for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years. And I met him at a meetup, pretty quiet guy, pretty scared to speak publicly, really intimidated about, he has really come so far. What I'll say about Adrian, he's very good about understanding what he needs to work on and being efficient about how he does that. Really funny guy. If anybody who's out, and he's been on one of our podcasts, so you can listen to him and get his contact information. But if you guys are interested in doing deals with him, but really he's a guy who's really worked at blocking and tackling. And I know that he's done this because he told me so with your helping with some of those blocking and tackling. And he recognized the challenges that he faced, and he's just knocked them down one at a time. Like, as you say, eating the elephant. You do it one bite at a time, and that's certainly what he's done. I'm just really amazed at how far he and his wife have come on their quest. So
give him another year or two, and he's just on such a trajectory. It's awesome to witness and be a part of, and of course, I'm just a small part of that. He's the one doing all the work, right? But it's just really cool to witness and see this stuff works. It's not that any of our coaches or anything in Lifeiner are rock stars, or that they are the secret here, the secret sauce. It's all about the system and the principles, and just honoring it and just trusting in the system, and it works.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to Adrian, it's the system is you got to be able to have the system. That's the important thing. McDonald's knew that they would build a business on systems, and anybody from Ford to McDonald's to whoever it is, they build a business on systems. But also, you have to have the vision to look at yourself. And you also have to put the ego in the back.
Yeah.
And those things you need help. And so I think that this is where, the coaching comes in. I certainly can see the value in that. Jason, if someone wants to team up with you and maybe have a conversation about maybe if this is a system for them, how would they reach you?
So if they'd like to reach me personally, I'd love that conversation. My direct email is jasonwojo, WOJO at lifeinair.com. If you want to learn more about Lifeinair, you can just check out lifeinair.com, or we have, 3-day events. Actually, we're doing one in Tampa here this summer. It's lifeinairevents.com. Between those two sites. And then, if you need to contact me or would like to have a conversation, just email me. You'll find out all you need to know about Lifeinair.
Hey, Jason, really appreciate your time today that you invested with us. And, we look forward to hearing from you more in the future. You make it into Tampa?
Yes, sir. We are going to be doing a 3-day event down there.
Terrific. Try to hook up with you then.
Will do. Thank you, Eric.
And that was Jason Wojo from Lifeinair. Really great to have these types of discussions in the first part of the year. People are assessing where they are in life, where they are in their career, what they're planning for the year, and where they're wanting to go. And I think this was a great opportunity to, early part of the first quarter of the year, to speak with Jason to talk and share with us how he moves the ball. And the fact that he's a real estate investor, I think was appropriate for our show to have him on. Next episode, we'll be back with Steven. Steven had a little bit of a break. He was in South Africa for a while. Again, guys, we appreciate all the time that you spend with us. Every time that you listen to us, it is meaningful to us. And we hope that you get something out of it. As always, questions, comments, concern, go to www.investfloridashow.com. Also, we've now got a mic on there that you can leave a message for us and we'll play it on the show. If you've got a question about real estate or you've got a suggestion for a guest that might be on, it's always helpful for us. As always, we appreciate you. And until next episode, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Steven Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.